It's the second of 3 debates we are hosting leading up to the November 3rd election. This one for a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. Tonight we are joined by the 2 candidates for that seat, Republican Tom Tiffany and Democrat Tricia Zunker. And we aim to help you get to know these candidates a little better over the next 60 minutes. Because of COVID-19, our setup is a little different tonight. In order to ensure proper social distancing, we're spread out in the Newswatch 12 studio. There's no audience here tonight, though. In addition to airing on Newswatch 12 right now, we're also live streaming this debate on Facebook. So feel free to give your thoughts, suggest some questions if you like. All right, first, quick background on each candidate. Mr. Tiffany, the Republican, is seeking re-election after winning a special election for this seat earlier this year. Before that, he served in the Wisconsin legislature and owned and operated wilderness cruises on the Willow Flowage for 2 decades. Ms. Zunker is the Democrat nominee for this seat. She is the Wausau School Board president, as well as an associate justice for her tribe, the Ho-Chunk Nation. Now tonight, unlike some other debates you may see where a moderator asks one candidate one question and then another candidate a different question, I'll be asking both candidates essentially the same questions. They'll each have 1 minute to respond, followed by 30 seconds each for rebuttal. We'll alternate who goes first, but before those questions, each candidate has 1 minute to provide an opening statement. Ms. Zunker won the coin toss. She may go first. Ms. Zunker, you can begin.
All right. Thank you, Justin, and thank you, WJFW, for hosting this important debate.
The first section of this debate, we're going to focus on COVID-19. Wisconsin is a recent hotspot. The Department of Health Services reports we are averaging over 3,000 new cases a day over the last week. Hospitalization numbers are way up. Deaths are also up, though not as much. Governor Evers issued a statewide indoor mask mandate. Most local law enforcement have told us they can't or won't enforce it. Republicans are fighting it. So basically, first, are you in favor of the mandate? And if not, what measures do you think are appropriate to try and stop the spread? We begin with Mr. Tiffany.
Yeah, so the coronavirus is our immediate challenge, and the virus is real. We all need to take it seriously and do everything we can to defeat the coronavirus epidemic. One of the things I did, I think it was in fact the last bill that I voted on in the state legislature, was to give Governor Evers more authority to be able to accomplish things necessary to make sure that people can have that bridge to get through this difficult time, including allowing him to move people around with the Department of Workforce Development so that they could get their unemployment benefits. The governor has not done that. He has not used some of those tools that were offered to him. And so I believe that we need greater leadership from the governor in regards to this issue. But I also think that we need to make sure that we hold China accountable for what they have done here in the United States.
Ms. Zunker, you have 1 minute. Are you in favor of the mask mandate? And if not, what measures do you think are appropriate?
I am in favor of saving lives. Today we had a record number of COVID cases in Wisconsin, over 3,800 COVID cases reported today. Wisconsin is a national hotspot, and I wish that people would follow the CDC guidelines of wearing masks, practicing safe social distancing, reducing travel to necessary travel, and washing hands frequently, because we know the science tells us that this reduces the spread of contagion. However, there are too many people that have failed to practice responsible behavior. We need to see this from our elected officials as well. Just last week, my opponent hosted an indoor campaign event. It was without safe social distancing, few masks, and this was very concerning to me, knowing that I was going to have to be nearby within the 14 days, just like we all are in this room right now. We know that it's not safe, and this is not a Democrat issue or a Republican issue. This is an American health and safety issue. We need to come together and we need to wear masks to reduce the spread of contagion.
Representative Tiffany, you have 30 seconds for any additional thoughts.
The virus is real, and we need to take it seriously. So let me give you some context to what my opponent just talked about. I was at an event where people were having food and drink, and also the picture that she saw, I was answering questions at that point. And so people can hear me clearly. I did not have my mask on, but I was also socially distanced. I take this very seriously. I socially distance whenever I can. I always carry a mask with me to use in indoor locations, and I probably wash my hands about 10 times a day. I make sure that I do protective things for the people that I'm around.
Ms. Zunker, you also have 30 seconds.
Well, again, I'm just going to make a plea to everybody to please wear your masks. We want life to resume to normal. We want our small businesses to be operating at full capacity. We want our students back in school and our teachers to be safe. And that's going to require wearing masks. And I don't know why my opponent is pointing to China when the situation that we are in is because of Trump's total failure of leadership. We have 218,000 Americans dead and 218,000 American families grieving as a result.
Well, COVID-19 has also taken an economic toll on our nation. Lawmakers in Washington have been unable to reach a compromise on a second round of COVID-19 relief. So what do you think should be done to help people and businesses struggling right now? What would you like to see in the bill?
Well, my opponent believes that the most important thing Congress can do this year as it relates to COVID-19 is to protect businesses from lawsuits from their employees. I believe the most important thing Congress can do this year is to protect lives and keep everybody safe. So there are a number of measures that we can do. It is inexcusable that we are 9 months into this pandemic and we don't have enough PPE for our frontline workers. We need to increase testing. We need to make it free and accessible, especially out in our rural parts of the district. We need to have hazard pay for our essential workers. We need to extend benefits for our unemployed workers who have lost their jobs due to COVID-19, and we need to have funding and support for our small businesses and family farmers so that they can stay afloat during this time. No one should lose their home. No one should go bankrupt because of this avoidable pandemic.
Representative Tiffany, what would you like to see in another bill?
So I alluded to the failure of Nancy Pelosi and her leadership out in the House of Representatives. The last bill that we voted on was a $2.2 trillion bill about 2 weeks ago, and it included stimulus funds for illegals. It defunded the police. It gave tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires in New York and California. It proposed to bail out Illinois and other fiscally irresponsible states, which would redound on us in Wisconsin here, where we would have to pick the tab up for those states that would get bailed out. That's what we saw from Speaker Pelosi, failed leadership. There's a much better way. There's a bill that I support, $138 billion to extend the Paycheck Protection Plan that especially would hit hard-hit industries, especially hospitality, hotels, restaurants. That bill would be an easy bill to pass if Nancy Pelosi would just offer that leadership. And my opponent can discredit what has happened with China. They did not do what they were supposed to in alerting the world about the pandemic that they unleashed from Wuhan in China.
Ms. Zunker, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
First, I would like to remind Congressman Tiffany that he represents the people of Wisconsin's 7th Congressional District. And when you use words like illegal, that is very disturbing to a lot of people, including myself here, who you do also represent, because no human being is illegal. Now, when we talk about failure of leadership, the failure of leadership comes from the Trump administration. They knew in January that this pandemic was real. They ignored the science. We need to listen to medical experts. We need to listen to the scientists as a source of decision making, and that wasn't done. And that's why there are so many lives lost today because of the Trump administration.
Representative Tiffany, you also have 30 seconds.
Yeah, 2 quick notes. January 31st, President Trump took decisive action, closing travel from China. Who criticized him for doing that? Joe Biden, the person that has endorsed my opponent. She talked about criticism of lawsuits. As a school board president, she should perhaps talk to school board administration, because I've been talking to administrators around Wisconsin here, including in hospitals, and they're saying they need protection from lawsuits so that they're not sued and stopping their operations from being able to go forward.
Wisconsin made some news earlier this year when Jacob Blake was shot in the back by police in Kenosha, leading to massive protests and violence in that city. So what kind of police reform would you like to see, if any, and how do you feel about the protests? We begin with Ms. Zunker.
Yeah, I support the First Amendment right to protest, but when things take the stance of turning into riots and looting, well, that's unacceptable, and I don't condone that. I support our law enforcement, and I'm really glad that you asked this question, because currently my opponent is running an attack ad against me that claims I want to defund the police as a measure of police reform. This is a lie. Nothing could be further from the truth. I support our law enforcement, and I am so grateful for the work that they do. I have a harmonious working relationship with law enforcement in my current elected capacity. In fact, I support more funding for law enforcement. Things like funding for training, federal funding for training on de-escalation techniques, funding for mental health resources for law enforcement, funding for increased body cams. And I believe that in situations where there are officers that are there and don't take action, such as with the horrific George Floyd situation where there were 3 officers, those officers should be accountable.
You'll have 30 more seconds, just a second, but Representative Tiffany, you have 1 minute. Any police reform you would like to see, and how do you feel about the protests?
I will always look to defend the police, not defund the police. It is so important that we support our police. Their morale is at an all-time low. I'm endorsed by 12 sheriffs across northern Wisconsin, Republicans and Democrats. They want to do the right thing. A bad cop, good cops don't like them. They want to get rid of them. I've seen this at the local level where we've had a few bad cops, and local people, locally elected people, made sure and they dealt with that situation. That's what our locally elected officials need to do, and that's the failure of Madison and Minneapolis. They did not deal with a bad cop when they had them. But we need to make sure we fund the police appropriately. I support a bill that Republicans have in the Congress that will spend almost $2 billion for additional training for police, 500,000 more body cams, so we make sure we know what happens with those traffic stops. We need to defend police, not defund them.
All right, earlier this month, Representative Tiffany, you were one of in fact, you're one of 18 representatives, about 5% of the House, to vote nay or no on House Resolution 1154, condemning QAnon and the conspiracy theories it promotes. The resolution cited the Combating Terrorism Center out of West Point, U.S. Military Academy.
Absolutely would have voted yes to condemn QAnon. QAnon is a dangerous conspiracy theory. It dehumanizes people. It advocates destruction of property. It threatens our democratic institutions.
Representative Tiffany, you have 1 minute for why you voted. I
appreciate my opponent answering the question for me. To the previous question, she said, why am I paying attention to Madison? Because those statues of Hans Christian Heg and Lady Forward are part of our heritage and culture. They are owned by us in northern Wisconsin also. That's why it was important to me. I denounce any group that foments unrest and violence in our country. I don't care where they stand on the political spectrum. I oppose them. But that's the final bill that Nancy Pelosi sent us home on 2 weeks ago. We have all this important business to take care of, including helping small businesses in the hospitality industry be able to stay on their feet through very difficult times. The Wisconsin Restaurant Association said half of their members may go out of business here if this continues. We need to make sure that we're voting on stuff that's going to benefit people. That's why you sent me to Washington, D.C.
Ms. Zunker, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, when you're elected to represent the people of Wisconsin's 7th Congressional District, then your vote must reflect that. Representative Tiffany was one of 17 Republicans to vote no on this resolution. It had immense bipartisan support. And while he says that he disavows any conspiracy theory, I haven't heard him at any point say he denounces QAnon. I haven't read it in any article, I haven't seen it, and I haven't heard it tonight.
Representative Tiffany?
And I have not seen a denouncement from my opponent in regards to Antifa and the anarchists that are out there. That's the tit-for-tat game that goes on in Washington, D.C. Folks, that's not why I went out to Washington, D.C. and why you elected me. You elected me to take care of serious business. We could have passed a bill, $138 billion, for Paycheck Protection Plan, to extend that to help businesses across America. Nancy Pelosi said, no, I will accept nothing less than $2.2 trillion, driving us even further in debt. We've got a record debt that's going to happen this year, and that's her priority. We can do better, ladies and gentlemen, and you should have that expectation of me also.
All right, time now for another short break. Be right back. You're watching the 7th Congressional District Debate here on Newswatch 12.